Live streaming is on.
Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. Oh, yeah. Today is March the 27th, 2020. Strong hand, long-term thinking. Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin in motion. Now, these dudes are in motion. They're not shut down. They're doing things. Compete, don't complain. Conviction. Have some conviction in this time. There are a lot of people that don't have conviction these days. I am offended by selling. Hello, my elite friends. It is This Week in Bitcoin time again. If you got questions, I got answers. Type in Bitcoin Meister, do a super chat. I'll ask these dudes some questions for you. But we got an all-star panel coming back today. Neil Woodfine makes his return. Gabriel D. Vine is in the house once again. Many times he's been here. And Jan Pritzker of Swan Bitcoin. Oh, yeah. He makes his debut. All right, dudes. We know what the current events are. We're going to get into that. Let's talk about a Jan tweet that was out there. Let me read you what it is, and Jan will comment on it.
Oh, boy.
What happens when you cut production by shutting down an economy and then increasing the supply of money? Asking for a friend who failed Economics 101. Ooh. So, Jan, what was that all about?
Well, I'm just trying to understand what is... Okay, look, I understand we're in a serious economic crisis here, right? And it's almost like we expect the people in charge to do something. They have to do something, right? They have to rescue us. Now, we're not talking about how we got here. We're definitely not asking those questions. And it's clear that we're going to have a lot of economic stimulus right now, and we're already seeing it. $6 trillion, $10 trillion. It'll keep going up. The number is arbitrary, really. I mean, it's pretty much we're going to stimulate until we fix it, right? So the question I ask is, how do you know what the right number is? And how are we going to deal with this idea that, yes, they're adding more quote unquote stimulus into the economy, but at the same time, the production shut down. There's no, stuff's not being made. I have friends in small businesses. My sister owns a cell phone store, trucking business. All this stuff is getting affected. So things are shut down, and yet the quantity of money is increasing. To me, it sounds like a recipe for some pretty disastrous inflation down the line. And, I'm not looking forward to that.
Now, what's it mean for Bitcoin, in your opinion?
I think it means the number goes up. Look, it's very simple, right? There's a certain amount of dollars in existence, and there's a certain amount of Bitcoin in existence. We know that the amount of Bitcoin isn't changing. The amount of dollars is being vastly increased. So just, simple ratios, there's going to be more dollars per Bitcoin than ever. And the question is, how many of those dollars will go into Bitcoin? That's really the only question, is like how many people have understood that this is happening, have recognized Bitcoin as an asset that's resistant to basically human meddling. And as more people realize it, as more people understand that Bitcoin is, the only scarce resource left in our whole financial system, I expect more dollars to flow into Bitcoin, and there's more dollars to be put into Bitcoin. So, number goes up.
And do you still remember that the halving is going to be happening in May and that it can't get canceled?
The halving is not being canceled. Yeah, it's really funny, right? Because we see every major government in the world is either already easing or is going to be easing or is going to be printing money. Things are going to get crazy. And Bitcoin just stands in stark contrast to everything that's going on around the world, in that its monetary policy is set in stone. Nobody's going to mess with it. And you can rely on this halving happening in May. There's no Bitcoin CEO or central bank to come in and quote unquote save us by printing more Bitcoin. It's not going to happen. So, you either recognize that today, or you recognize that in May, or you see that in the news after the pump happens. Maybe it'll take a year or two. I don't know. But as more people realize it, it's going to happen.
All right. Neil, what's your take on this insane money printing that was almost unfathomable, well, at least for me beforehand, but now it's 6 trillion is just a normal number. Unbelievable.
Yeah, to be honest, I see these numbers. I don't think they're that crazy. I think things are just getting started. And even if the amount's like 10, 20, 30 trillion tomorrow, I don't think any of us would be particularly surprised, or at least I personally wouldn't be that surprised. Like, these guys print money year in, year out, and I don't think this is any different. I think that obviously for the long term, it's good for Bitcoin, but in the super short term, like, it's difficult to say, because we know that there's a lot of people invested in Bitcoin right now that, I mean, we're talking about short-term price movements here. I'm not sure if we're into speculation, but I think we know there's a lot of people invested in Bitcoin that aren't really bought into the Bitcoin project. They're just looking for number goes up and fast gains. And if Bitcoin doesn't perform before the halving, or if they need to liquidate to cover all sorts of other leverage that they have elsewhere, like, we could see like Bitcoin underperform pre-halving or even just after the halving. Like, that really wouldn't surprise me. And I could imagine like a lot of Bitcoiners getting a little bit deflated that, like, despite all of this, like, these trillions being pumped into the economy, that Bitcoin is not like pumping. I mean, even now, like, myself, I'm a little bit surprised that not more people have cottoned on to what's to come.
Oh, I think it's happening though.
Yeah.
So I was just gonna say, like, I see I have all these friends coming out of the woodwork who totally ignored the prior dips and pumps that happened over the last year, but now they're all asking about Bitcoin. So I'm wondering what has changed, and I think people are recognizing that the economy around them is collapsing. They're starting to see that there's something wrong with the money, not something wrong. You know, they're starting to ask the bigger questions, basically.
I think Neil's got a point, though. I think there's some people that were like perma bulls that are like, wait a second, the world's ending. Shouldn't Bitcoin be going through the roof? And I think some people are disappointed. I mean, there was huge liquidations, though. I don't know if we'll have. I think the people with the weakest of the hands that had a lot, they're already liquidated. I don't think we're going to see something like that again, where people need dollars and they're getting rid of their Bitcoin. I think all those guys have been flushed out. But I fully expect after the halving the price to drop. I'm not, and people would be disappointed because they just don't get it. You got to be long term about this type of thing. But Neil, anything else you had to say about the money printing and this current ridiculous situation that's going on?
Well, I mean, like I say, I think we're just getting started. Like, obviously, the effects of shutting down all of these businesses is going to be felt later rather than right now, and they're going to need even more money pumped into the system to keep all of their leverage going. So, yeah, like.
Do you think the dollar can be printed? Do you think the dollar will ever experience hyperinflation in the United States?
Eventually, personally, I think it's inevitable. Like, I often think back to the book When Money Dies, and like kind of some of the insane things that the central bank and the authorities were saying about, like, we need more money in the system, and there's just no kind of end to that. They never like ever question that narrative. And right now we're seeing exactly the same thing. Like, nobody is asking the question like, okay, when is too much money? When is like they're too much? And nobody's going to stop. Like, they'll print it into oblivion easily, and they kind of have to. Like,
all right, Gabriel, I am sure you've got a lot to say on this topic, man. Take it away. Money printing, etc.
I do have a lot to say, and it's all a bit of a jumble in my head. And it's not because it's the morning time. It's because we are working with so little information. There's a lot of disinformation floating around. There's, of course, hordes of confused people trying to analyze the situation from an outdated and or totally inaccurate world model. You see that a huge amount over the past few years, but even especially now where we're getting so little information about why things are being done. There's so many wheels within wheels conspiracy theories because there's lots of conspiracies in the world. People are doing things secretly and they don't want others to know. Those are called conspiracies. However, we don't know who's doing them, and we don't know how many groups there are, and we don't know what everybody's intentions are. So I'm just going to address some of the things that you guys have already talked about because it's so difficult to get an overview right now. This is a time of topsy-turvy turmoil. So regarding the flush out, we saw the most sudden plunge in Western markets in history, more sudden than 1987, which was the previous, quickest huge crash, much faster than 1929. And I don't think that it's over. So I'm not necessarily buying into the narrative that, oh, the flush out already happened. But for Bitcoin is low-hanging fruit for these large institutions. It doesn't have enough of a track record for them to want to stick in it for any length of time. So Adam, I think you're probably right that the Bitcoin flush out is over, but other asset flush outs, I think, may lie ahead as we do the next leg and the leg after that and the leg after that down, because we're only at 2017 lows. We still have to bust through the 2015 high and the 2013 high and the 2011 possible baseline after European banking crash. So that's my comment about the flush out. Now that kind of leads me to the next subject, which is cash balance versus savings. In times of deflationary crashes, which is basically essentially the beginning of the recession that we're about to see in Q2, 3, people run from risk to cash. Cash is should be the least risky asset, right? For basic expenditures, and the people want optionality right now because assets are crashing and they want to be able to jump into things as they bottom. Investors want to be able to jump into things. They want that optionality that holding cash allows, and this is something Keynesians hate. And of course, it causes a lower money velocity, which is part of the deflationary situation that we're in right now, where debt not only is being defaulted on, which means extinguishment. So basically, debt is created out of thin air, and then it disappears into thin air. As soon as anybody defaults, it causes a chain reaction, and all of that quote unquote money, it's not money, it's actually just a loan that was created out of thin air. Goes back to where it came from, which is nothing. So we're in the situation where more and more of that nothing that was created and it was imaginary is being extinguished back to nothing. So that causes this deflationary crash scenario. And people, with their losing bets, they're needing to cash out their savings in order to cover the bad bets. And that is causing the drop, not only in Bitcoin, but also in gold and other traditional safe haven assets. They drop along with stocks and more risky. The less risky assets are also getting liquidated because cash is the ultimate asset in very sharp deflation like this. So that's the situation we're in now. And as you guys pointed out, just because the issuance rate of Bitcoin is about to go down by 50% in 2 months, less than 2 months, probably. It doesn't mean that people will flood in because they may not have the capital to put into savings. Bitcoin is a new risk, somewhat higher risk, somewhat speculative, but also used for savings by many individuals. And they may not have any cash to put into savings anytime soon because of this deflationary scenario, high unemployment, high risk. People want that optionality of holding government scrip instead of savings assets because they're more liquid. It's easier to jump into things. It's easier to cover losses and stay fleet of foot when you have a cash balance.
Yeah, there's not a savings mindset in a time of panic. I mean, it's just this is not a time to think about, oh yeah, Bitcoin looks like a great long-term investment when you're losing your job. I mean, that's just that's what the reality is on the street right now. And hey, pound that like button, by the way, Gabriel. That was a beautiful explanation. All these dudes are linked to below. Check them all out. Well, Gabriel, obviously a lot of this crisis is most of it is manufactured because the government shut down all the businesses. So how long do you think this can go on for? That businesses can stay shut down in the Western world before?
Well, that's perfect. That brings me to my next subject that I wanted to talk about, which is as Jan mentioned, this recession and idea that we're in now. is going to be leading to an inflation, right? So they're printing a huge amount of this government script, and so basically it's number go up time as soon as there's any economic activity. Because right now things are frozen, as you pointed out. Governments around the world have done what they maybe should have done in 2009 with bird flu, so we could have avoided many thousands of terrible deaths. Maybe there should have been a bit more of a shutdown, but this is really extreme. It seems outsized. It's an extremely confusing time because, yes, there's a very dangerous disease. No, it's not that much more risky than a very bad flu for most people. And it's this hugely confused thing. It's like, oh, well, bird flu is this and that. And it was like, well, actually, they probably underreacted to bird flu. And then now we're in this overreaction possibly. So it's a really extremely confused time. But I do think that we're going to go from this deflationary shock panic to a short, very sharp depression recession for a couple of quarters. And then after that is when there will be economic activity. And as the money velocity increases, that's when you get your inflation. So we're going to go from recession to stagflation is my prediction this year. And that's probably when Bitcoin will begin to benefit from this money printing. And it's not just a matter of, oh, it's more dollars chasing the limited amount of Bitcoin. And by the way, it's not the same amount of Bitcoin. It's just a steady rate that's dropping by half very soon, which is really, really different from the machine go brr situation that we're in with the central banks. So that's when Bitcoin will probably experience its surge, and it's going to be an outsized surge. It's not like, okay, well, there's more dollars, so automatically Bitcoin goes up with the rate of inflation. Oh, no. Maybe carrots will be at the rate of average rate of inflation. Bitcoin and gold probably, since they are monetary assets and savings.
Ooh, you muted yourself, Gabriel.
Oh no, that was such a good.
Oh man, you're in the middle of something. What happened? He'll be back, people. Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, while he's off, I wanted to comment really quick on a follow up there. I saw a really awesome chart tweeted by Jesse Colombo on Twitter, which was basically this, essentially coming from the 70s, and showing all the bubbles, the 1987, the .com, the housing bubble, and whatever it is that's happening now, the everything bubble. And the question that happened for me in my head is like, which bubble is bursting now?
Technologies.
Oh, there he is. He's back.
I don't know if he knows he was.
He may not be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello.
Gabriel, you got cut off for the last minute there.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay. Where did we get cut off?
You said that the gold and Bitcoin will go up a lot more because they have like a monetary premium. I think that's what you were trying to explain.
That's right, monetary premium. So they're gonna huge their surge will be hugely outsized compared to the rate of inflation. But I do see a very high rate of inflation. I wouldn't be surprised if next year we see double-digit inflation in the U.S. dollar, which will be a real shock to the economy. However, I have to differ with Neil's idea. I think that some sort of reset will happen before it gets to the point of hyperinflation. Remember, the dictionary definition of hyperinflation is more than 100% inflation per month. Whether you consider that monetary inflation or price inflation, I don't think they're going to let it get to that level, but I wouldn't be that surprised to see 10, 12, 15, even 20, 25% inflation next year, which will be a huge shock to the American public.
Yeah.
Terrible.
I'd like to clarify that I'm not saying that the US dollar is going to hyperinflate next year. I think they can certainly push the system a lot further. I don't have any kind of data to back that up, but my gut feeling is that they could run through another like one or two economic crashes. But I think hyperinflation is on the horizon eventually for the US dollar. I haven't seen anything.
It's possible. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they put a new Fed coin, like a gold-backed. They return to a gold-backed system actually, but it'll be a new asset that they don't peg the dollar to, and the dollar. That's when the hyperinflation could happen.
Yeah. I mean, like historically, like Just from the accounts that I've read, generally that new replacement doesn't come into place until the old one starts hyperinflating. So
right, I see that kind of happening at the same time.
But what do you guys think? Just this is an economics question because I don't necessarily understand it, so this is not a statement, not rhetorical. So yes, we expect the amount of money in the system to increase and so on, but we also know that there's a global demand for dollars that looks like it's outstripping the supply of dollars. So because dollars are essentially the reserve currency, is the demand from other countries going to basically act as a counterbalance to this inflation because it's going to make the dollar go up in value and thus be deflationary in terms of prices? What do you guys think about that idea, and does it have merit?
This is a really important issue to bring up, and I think that temporarily that's why the dollar is so extremely strong and experienced its steepest 8-day surge ever just recently during the panic, of course. But I think that this is really the key to the reset. It will. What I predict is that the central banks and/or countries will come together, treasuries will come together and negotiate a debt forgiveness, a jubilee for the countries. In other words, they're going to all default at once and come up with agreements as to how to negotiate their debt default. So I think that's really the key, is that when they default on all of those loans in dollars is when the dollar will inflate hugely, because they're just not going to pay it back. And so they no longer have any demand. That's the thing about debt. It just goes away, and then the demand disappears instantly into thin air.
Neil, did you have anything to say about Jan's question?
So, I mean, like, we know that a number of kind of nations that are not particularly allied with the US, like Russia and China and a bunch of other countries, they're all repatriating a lot of gold. They're increasing their gold reserves. So, like, I think if the US starts to, or if it keeps on printing $1 trillion platinum coins, that all of these countries are going to start to probably accelerate that process. So the US and people in the US have to be concerned, because there's a lot of dollars that can get sent back home. And as well, like, if we get into an economic crisis, then we could be facing kind of like more hostilities between various different countries and potential war. Like, anything can happen when things start collapsing. So, like, in those kind of situations, there may be kind of some other kind of currency wars going on at the same time, which could harm the US, because everybody's got a lot of ammunition, right?
Jan, what was that tweet you were about to share before?
Oh yeah, so I was looking at this tweet from Jesse Colombo, March 18th. He tweeted out a chart, which is it's a U.S. household net worth as percent of GDP chart, and it basically goes through all the bubbles that happened from essentially the 70s as the end of the gold standard. And we see, the dot-com bubble, the housing bubble, and now this current, he calls it the QE and zero interest rate bubble. You can call it the everything bubble, whatever we want to call it. The question in my head was, which bubble is currently bursting? Is it just this current bubble that happened starting from 2008? Or is it actually a much bigger bubble that's going all the way back potentially to the 70s and all the asset, price inflation that happened because of the loss of the gold standard? If that's the bubble that's bursting now and all assets will be repriced, we are looking at a much, much bigger down. And I'm kind of with Gabriel here. I don't think this is the end of it. This Dow is in a bull market tweet from Wall Street Journal. It's complete asinine. Like, what are you talking about? The entire economy shut down. But yeah, I think this is a much bigger deal, and it goes on for longer. And so the question is just, which bubble is bursting? Is it this last 10 years, or is it the last 20 or the last 50? I don't have the answer to that. That's a question that I'm bringing to the group.
I think this is a 107 year, actually. Not a 50 year. This is all the way back. This is all the way back to what's it called? Jekyll
Island. Yeah.
Yeah, Jekyll Island is where the Federal Reserve, where the bankers came together to create a banking zaibatsu, This is basically an industry concern where they have total control over the script supply, the paper supply in the markets, and that's when the industry took off. And so the industrial production efficiencies gained by all of the incredible machinery that was being invented throughout the second half of the 19th century and into the 20th century, they saw that they would be able to steal and skim off huge amounts of wealth from the American economy with these efficiencies by hiding the production efficiencies from the innovation in machinery and in the industrial age. They were able to skim this off and not only not have deflation like there was in the 19th century, expansionary deflation. In other words, greater efficiency leads to greater value of gold and everybody's wealth increasing, rising tide lifting all boats in the 19th century, and abolition of slavery, everything like that. They instead instituted a policy of inflation on top of erasing and stealing all the gains from the efficiencies of production. So they really pulled a number on the U.S. A bunch of people saw it back then. There's the famous, wonderful drawing of the giant octopus sucking money out of every institution and spitting it into the New York Stock Exchange, and with its tentacles. And that's what we're at the end of now. This is the end of that paradigm. It is the 50-year mark coming up next year of the completely pure fiat, where you couldn't exchange it for metal at all since 1971. But this is all the way going back there, and I think that they might be actually doing what Lincoln and Jackson and Kennedy wanted to do, which is bring all of the money production back to the Treasury, like the Constitution says. We'll see if they can manage to repeal the Federal Reserve Act from 1913.
So this might be the beginning of the end of the Fed, you think? I don't know. I mean, how about if all the banks could be nationalized on the other side of things, and that everyone would just have an account at the Fed, with digital dollars. I mean, we could go in that direction too with this. I mean,
well, the Fed isn't the nation, but the Fed is not the nation. So until they repeal the Federal Reserve Act, and it's not a private banking concern, and maybe if they nationalize the Fed, that would be a repeal of the Federal Reserve Act, because then it would be owned by the Treasury, which is a totally different situation now. But yeah, that could conceivably happen. Well,
again, you're predicting the end of the Fed from all this, and I think we're definitely we're not there, but it could happen. But right now, they're the darling of the world. I mean, they're the one printing up the money, the trillions of dollars. I mean, they're in charge right now. I mean,
yeah, they really can do no wrong, because like they're here to rescue us, right? So if they print 6 trillion and it doesn't help, well, they just say, well, we didn't print enough. And if they print too much, well, we did the best we could. There's no like measuring stick by which we can judge their performance, because we don't know what the alternative looks like.
That's not quite true, Jan. We can look at the effect of their actions, and this is where this disinformation and confusion comes in, because the Fed has been bazooking, and not everything they're doing is working. And right now, we see that with the fallout from the repo market. This is the overnight lending market and short-term lending market between banks. The fault line appeared in September, and they papered it over with 80 billion, 100 billion, basically just injected that amount and let it roll over every night. And then things really started to, implode in February, and they've been shoving money at various parts of the financial system, basically their member private corporations. And it's not working, because they're offering the same thing. They're offering free, that we're going to buy, like QE, right? Basically, we're going to Fed says, we're just going to print money and buy your crap that's not worth anything off of your books, and take it off your books so you don't have to take those losses anymore. And meanwhile, they've also given the ability to take loans out. But of course, there's no interest in the loans. In other words, the interest, I mean that there's no demand for these loans. In fact, their whole loan program is going without any takers, because everyone's like, well, why would I take these loans if you're just going to buy all my losing assets off my books? So that is what makes me think that this is not all that it seems, and perhaps Powell and Trump are trying to implode this thing, trying to break it. That it's conceivable that that's what's going on, because their actions don't make perfect sense, but nothing close. They're throwing everything at this, and they're not doing it in an organized fashion, but in my book at all.
I would agree that most everything that the Fed tries is a failure, but the only way to get rid of it would be if the people rebelled, that the people spoke up, if there was demand for this lunacy to end. And we are living in a time where people are demanding more and more authoritarianism, more and more answers from the government. So I know the Fed isn't per se the government, but I don't know. I can see how this is the beginning of the end of the Fed, but right now they're having their way with the country. I mean, they really are, and that's we'll see how this goes. But I do want to.
Oh, yeah. I want to clarify. I want to clarify that. Yeah, what I'm talking about is going to take years.
Okay.
This sort of like repealing the act could even happen within 2 years, but that whole process of playing it out, I mean, it's at least 4 or 5 years.
Let's talk about the authoritarianism that's become popular these days. It seems like people are scared about their health, and when they're scared about their health, I guess they're willing to give away their freedom, it appears, from what I've analyzed here. And I've been very surprised that there are many a Bitcoiner it seems like they're a lot more statist than I thought some people were. So I'll ask Neil, what is your take on the road to authoritarianism? What has this surprised you at all? What direction are we going on? Is it going to get worse?
So I'm definitely very surprised by particularly the reactions of many Bitcoiners in the space to this crisis. I think what's most concerning for me is that any kind of public questioning of either the facts of the matter or the logic of the measures being taken is starting to kind of it's getting this reaction where people are calling it harmful and dangerous, and it feels like kind of the beginnings of some kind of hate speech laws, where like there's certain things we're not allowed to talk about because it can harm people's health and lead to deaths. And like that's like the biggest concern of mine. But in general, like I'm very concerned by how quickly people have been to support not only kind of enforcing themselves being locked at home, but also their neighbors and strangers and just basically anybody else they know, without any kind of serious questioning of how long that is going to take place. Like people are saying like they want the government to enforce like kind of basically home imprisonment, and they're not like set out the terms for that. So like they're not saying like, okay, we're going to do this for 2 weeks, and at 2 weeks that's it, or like we'll do this indefinitely until these criteria are met. They're just asking to be locked up indefinitely. That's like that's seriously concerning. And like it doesn't surprise me in the general population, like let's call them normies or people. Like I probably would have fallen into that camp before I got into Bitcoin and got exposed to all these like different ideas. But like for Bitcoiners to start to think that, that's definitely very concerning. And I wouldn't even say it's like a small pocket of Bitcoiners. I would say it was the majority of at least Bitcoin Twitter, let's say. And I tend to think that like people say that Bitcoin Twitter doesn't matter. I do think it matters. I think Bitcoin Twitter is more libertarian, more aligned with the values than perhaps all of the other Bitcoin holders. And I'm not saying they're not Bitcoiners, but like there's definitely like a type of Bitcoiner that is very kind of values aligned, right? So and then another thing that I really hate about it is this paranoia that it's created. So this is like less on the authoritarian side, although it's a good tool that they can use, in that like between families and between friends and between strangers and neighbors, all of a sudden everybody's kind of afraid of each other. And like I'm hearing stories in the UK where they've implemented a bunch of kind of social distancing rules, and you have people in their gardens, for instance, having conversations 8 to 10 meters apart across a garden fence. And like that sounds like really nice, and like people are making the best of it, stuff like that. But like if you think about it a bit more, it's like, well, what happens if one person started like walking closer to the other person? Or what happens if like somebody knocked on the door and started like kind of like asking for some supplies or whatever? Like all of a sudden, like everybody's like scared of each other. And like if your uncle wants to come around and visit, it's like he might bring around the virus and kill you. And I really don't like this kind of this paranoia that everybody's got about all these asymptomatic people. There's no good statistical reason for these people to be afraid of each other. A lot of these people are not even vulnerable people to this disease, and yet like there's this fear that's going on between everybody. And that's really sad to see. I mean, there's all sorts of different angles to take on this, but this embrace of control and authority is really hypocritical. When if you're supporting Bitcoin, not only do you support the values of freedom in finance, it's a small step to get to freedom in like speech and movement and freedom of assembly. Like it's a very small step to get to that. But then also if you support Bitcoin, like if Bitcoin succeeds, all of these measures that you're calling for in this kind of crisis that that some of these people are saying are absolutely necessary, or otherwise millions will die, like those kind of measures become a lot more difficult when the state can't fund its operations, if it's being defunded by difficulty of obtaining taxation and no longer has access to cheap credit and can't inflate the money supply and get cheap loans, that kind of thing. So it just doesn't fit. There's a lot of conflict there that like I feel like a lot of people are maintaining.
I want to point. I mean, there's social shaming going on. People are being informants. It's unbelievable, the stuff I see going on. Jan, what's your take on all this?
I have a similar take, but slightly more nuanced. I think, I don't want, that's not a disparaging comment towards Neil. My nuance is that, like, I like the voluntary part of it where, like, for example, my mom is immunocompromised, right? So for me, if I get the virus, okay, worst case scenario, maybe something bad happens, but like I can't have it get to my mom. So for example, for me, I have to isolate myself pretty strongly. And that's my voluntary action that I'm taking. Okay. And so when I do have paranoia with my neighbors, and I agree, it totally sucks because now I went outside, my kids were playing outside, the neighbor's kid like coughed, and I was like, oh shit, like we can't play with those neighbors anymore. It's like, it's really messed up. Right. But I have no idea of knowing. At the same time, I think that people calling for authoritarian response to this is horrible because, as I was pointing out on Twitter earlier, like, 18 years ago, 19 years ago, we had the shoe bomber. Nobody remembers the shoe bomber anymore, but we all take off our shoes at the fucking airport. Pardon me, I know I'm not supposed to swear. Sure. We all take off our shoes at the airport, and we don't no longer remember why we do that. And there's definitely people now that are 18 years of age that don't have any clue what the world looked like before the TSA. So these authoritarian institutions that we ask for today, like Neil said, they become permanent. They're not temporary measures. If we give the power to the government to control means of production, which a lot of governors are now calling for, they want to control means of production. They want to set prices. I mean, I come from the former Soviet Union and I know exactly where that goes, and it's not a good situation. We don't want to be there. So while I do think people should take voluntary measures, depending on their own risk tolerance and their own, family situations, I think calling for government to like police the streets with guns, which I mean, I'm in liberal circles. My whole community is liberal. I thought of myself as fairly liberal before I found Bitcoin, but like liberal to me is not about telling other people what to do. It's about actually liberty. So I guess I'm more of a libertarian than anything. But like you can't ask people with guns to patrol the streets to stop this thing because there's no end to that. There really is no end to that, and the cure could be a lot worse than the disease. That said, I do think this disease is a lot worse than the flu. I mean, we have frontline coverage from hospitals that are becoming overwhelmed. And I think that's really the issue. It's not of people dying or the risk you take as a young person. I think it's about the hospital systems that are completely overrun. And when they are overrun, then all kinds of other diseases are going untreated. All kinds of other people are going to suffer. But again, it should be done on a information basis, on a scientific basis, and on a voluntary basis, not from guys with guns trying to tell you to stay in your house.
Beautiful. Pound that like button. Gabriel, I'm handing it off to you. Go hit a home run. You've given a lot to say here.
Well, where to begin? It's quite a web. And, I'm the conspiracy guy on the panel. So it's incumbent upon me to explore those murky alleyways of schemes and possibilities. First of all, what are you guys doing with your echo chambers? You got to curate better. If you're seeing people calling for statist intervention, you have not created your Bitcoin maximalist bubble efficiently. I mean,
I would agree there. My Twitter feed's actually just fine. I'm not sure where Neil's getting the statists or Adam.
Adam and Neil are trying to get the finger on the pulse of what's going on in general, so they're not quite as selective as Jan and I. I'm in extreme West Bitcoin land, and Neil is too. But he'll follow people from whatever Central Cryptopia as well, just to see what the idiots are spewing. And so now this is the price you pay. Idiots.
I think it's not. Honestly, it's not. I don't follow any crypto followers, and that is definitely a line that I would draw. I'm following a lot of Bitcoin maximalists, and there's a large portion of Bitcoin maximalists in this authoritarian camp. Like that's
crazy because
possible.
see, basically, for me, like as soon as anybody starts to say something that I think is authoritarian, I say, nope, I'm not following that person. And if they're really bad, I'll block them. So I've got the large block list, very curated. Nobody in my list they all sound like Jan. I question this call
Thanks.
for authority. They're all questioning the calls, and maybe they're retweeting some ridiculously authoritarian tweet. But no, it's definitely. I'm not surprised that people are showing their true colors now, because it's a time of crisis. So you get to see what people's real beliefs are. It's not, you don't get to see the veneer of fake libertarian libertard, talking points. You get to see where the fear, where they go when the fear hits, right? I'm like Jan. I've got high risk individuals in my family, so I'm also doing self-isolating. But I'm in total agreement with you guys that this is not the time to implement authoritarian measures. However, we're still in this fiat world where there's scientism informing fiat corrupt policy, and it's just all a giant cesspool, and like Trump says, a swamp. So the way I see it now is that actually, in general in society, the libertarian view and the authoritarian view, we're seeing it at its most polarized right now. We're seeing the strongest views being expressed, and that's probably a good thing, because now we can begin to figure out who's where and what people want and what's going on a little bit. And sometimes these crisis points are good for clarifying, different people's direction in society and what's really going on. And that brings me to what is really going on here. Well, there was this doctor, I think he's a high-ranking doctor in the CDC, arrested in January, along with some Chinese nationals, health technicians, moving vials of stuff between Wuhan and other places, especially Canada. This guy was arrested for accepting money from the Chinese Communist Party, essentially. So we've got quite a bit of evidence to suggest that the COVID-19 virus is a bioweapon. There's the only P4 level facility for creating bioengineering is located in Wuhan. So according to the rumors that are floating around, I can't substantiate. I mean, the arrest definitely happened that I was talking about. I can't remember the doctor's name, but no, now moving into speculative territory. The rumors are that this thing was not released how it was meant to be released. However, it's very clear to me personally that this was an intentional bioweapon release in order to create a fear situation. You have the WHO, which has huge tentacles from the Chinese Communist Party, working together with Bill Gates from Microsoft. They ran a big, exercise. This is a classic false flag thing where they do a big exercise that's exactly what they run 6 months later. This exercise happened in December, and of all the bioweapons they could have chosen to do their quote-unquote exercise, they did a coronavirus. Wow, what a coincidence. So Gates has his fingerprints all over this, where he's been talking about the dangers of bioweapons for years and how we need to create a one world government that and create an idea. And now he's calling for chipping, where you can, the chip's going to tell you whether you got this virus, and then we can lock you in a chamber. It's disgusting. So this is, in my opinion, we've got the classic, problem reaction solution scenario from the one world government, new world order cabal people, but it's got this flavor of desperation because there's this Trump and the military are very anti-globalist right now, at least on paper. So either they're working together and it's a controlled opposition move by Trump to pretend like he's cleaning the swamp, but not really do it, or there's genuinely a power vying situation between the Putin and Trump and the non-globalists and the old school globalists, Obama, Gates, Communist Party, and deep State Department, CIA crowd. So either there's a real conflict or there's no conflict. I tend to think there's a real conflict, although I don't trust either side. So I think that the Trump and the military maybe want to usher in some technocratic situation that's not quite as bad as the wartime. Just constant warfare and constant tragedies, but they still want to maintain power, which is not cool either. So we've got a lot of questions here, and I think we're actually going to start getting some answers this decade. This is my prediction. The age of leaks only began in the teens. The real stuff, we're going to get the real drops coming in the next few years. I think it's going to be absolutely crazy. And this is where we come back to the libertarian authoritarian divide, and how that's going to be bridged, and how the people can wake up if we learn the truth. Snowden was really helpful, but people feel powerless. What can you do? With Bitcoin now maturing, and we have this situation of leaks coming out, if we start to get the actual information about this bioweapon release, if we start to get the true story, and that narrative spreads among the populace virally, where we get the truth that, this was all intentional. They wanted to seize power. They wanted to create a world government to keep you down. It's conceivable that millions and millions and millions of people could wake up and stop calling for authoritarian controls. I know it's hard to see for everybody now because we've had an entire century of this, but the old American way was the rugged individualist. I think that's going to come back, but it's going to take a really painful wake-up call. And this issue right now, this bioweapon attack on the world populace, that is actually not doing that well, and people are really taking it seriously, and we're actually keeping it under control. If we can also keep the reaction under the control and keep our level heads and learn the truth about what's going on, this could actually be the inflection point for a wake-up call for humanity. And I'm seeing a lot of signs of that, and I'm feeling extremely optimistic, which is a really big contrast to what I'm seeing out there right now. So I encourage everybody to look at the silver lining.
All right, dudes. This is why we have Gabriel on the show. You're not going to hear me say those things.
This is deep, man.
That's it. He could. I don't think it's a bioweapon, obviously, but everyone is in the chat is loving it right now. And I got to say, Hastings International Solutions sent $2. He said best weekly show. And God Almighty, people are saying, Winwo TM says, I got $3. Anybody got $4? Strong hand. Well, thank you. And Hastings International Solutions sends $4. So, dude, they were loving they were loving it. And someone says, you like this doomer action? No, I don't like doomer action. No, I don't like, but I let everybody can say what they're going to say here. Gabriel's got his opinion. When Gabriel's on this show, what's coming out. There's got to be some conspiracy talk coming out. But no, there is. I hope whatever's going on, that people do wake up and see that they shouldn't be drifting toward authoritarianism. But I don't know if that's going to happen because I just see people are so scared right now. I know people, logical people, are getting really frustrated with the situation. I'll say that, but I say it all the time. 80% of the people, I don't know, they're just happy with their big screen TVs and such. So before we move on to what everyone here is doing, these guys, 3 guys, are in motion even during this unproductive time. So we're going to talk about that. But Jan or Neil, do you have anything more to add to the authoritarianism subject line here?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that regardless of whether we buy into any conspiracy theory about where the virus came from, I think it is essentially the perfect enemy. People need an enemy in order to go to authoritarianism, right? And usually it's going to be the outsiders, the Mexicans, the Chinese. It's going to be some other race. It's going to be somebody that we can identify visually. But the virus is the perfect enemy because it's everywhere. We can't see it. So we have to be always afraid, right? And that's the ultimate perfect enemy for an authoritarian state. So regardless whether the virus came from a lab or came from nature, it doesn't really matter. It's here now. And I think if you're a state and you're looking at the situation, even without malicious intent, you yourself are in fear. Even if we assume that everybody's behaving sort of game theoretically, correctly and honestly, then the government is here to protect us, and their enemies all around them as well. And it's completely invisible and it's scary. So of course we're going to see extreme authoritarianism come out of that. And I'm not optimistic in terms of people waking up in this environment until we have a vaccine, whatever it is that clears this thing away from us. As long as it's around us and we can't see it, we're going to be scared and we're going to do stupid authoritarian things, and it's going to suck. So, all right. Yeah, sorry.
Neil, your take, are people waking up or are people shutting off?
So I think, so for instance, I've got a couple of family members that would normally follow whatever the establishment position was on these kind of things. And they're already starting to voice concerns about the kind of the attitude that's kind of permeating throughout the UK right now, where people are kind of spying on each other. There's kind of like a little bit of pitchfork kind of witch hunt stuff going on. There's like police following people around with drones. That's concerning them to the point where they start to voice those concerns and wondering whether people are reacting in the right way. So I think what it will probably do is it will expand a bunch of people that start questioning the reality that they're living within. However, for the rest of the people, it will probably entrench their positions further, where they kind of call for more and more kind of extreme measures, and that trend will continue. So hopefully that group of people that are starting to question things more will start getting drawn towards Bitcoin, especially once there's a bunch of measures that we can expect to come in, like in the wake of this coronavirus thing, stuff like UBI and helicopter money. We know they've been wanting to do it for years. This is their excuse. They're already starting to do it. Cash bans, they're going to blame it on the virus. It transmits disease. We've got to get rid of cash. Okay, everybody's going to be using digital currency. They're probably going to get helicopter money delivered direct from the bank. You're talking about accounts direct with the Fed. I think that's going to happen, and that's going to shore up control with the central banks away from the commercial banks. Also, we're going to see negative interest rate policies. So like they've already dropped, everybody's dropped to zero. They'll go through that as this crisis worsens. Negative interest rate policy will become very normal. They'll talk about how it's actually good for the economy. Economics textbooks will be rewritten. And then also, in addition to all that, with all this crazy inflation going on, we can expect price controls that'll start in like rent. People hate landlords right now, and that hatred will just increase with kind of the economic problems that go on. So the first things that'll get hit by price controls will be landlords, but then it's going to start expanding to like various other daily necessities. We already see the price gouging rules getting implemented, right? So, and I think all of these things will encourage people to look at alternatives. Like most people will go along with it for sure, but there's going to be a growing kind of momentum. More and more people kind of starting to question things, and they're the kind of our allies and what we kind of our resources to kind of start implementing these new systems.
Really, really great points there, which temporary measures are going to become permanent measures. And I like landlords are about to be scapegoated out of control. A lot of people are like, oh, real estate's so great. I can collect a check every month. Dude, you are in for a whole new world. I mean, I already see it. There are these rent strikes that are happening. I mean, and you can understand why the people are frustrated. They're not getting paid anymore. So I want to ask the other two guys, the panel guys, Gabriel, and I ask Jan this too. What temporary measures do you think are going to become permanent?
Wow. Well, the situation now is so fluid. It's very difficult to say. Here's once again coming back to this conflict between the globalists and this sort of ad hoc alliance of countries that want to maintain their sovereignty. I think that there's going to be these attempts to centralize further, attempts to implement authoritarian policies, and then consistent pushback from various corners. People just not doing it. Cops refusing to enforce certain regulations. I think there's going to be quite a lot of topsy-turvy situations with this. There's going to be tax revolts, rent revolts, huge influx into Bitcoin over the next 3 years. And just extreme collapsing institutions. And so I think we're going to see tons of attempts to permanentize these authoritarian measures and lots of failures. They can't actually do it. And people just, and the public tide, I think we're going to see some really massive lurches in the Overton window. The Overton window is, basically that which is acceptable to the public at large. I think we're going to see the frame of this Overton window pushed to nearly breaking point where people's opinions about what's acceptable for authorities and the public is going to shift so greatly. In addition, I'd like to address Jan's fear-mongering a little bit. I do see this disease outbreak being totally losing steam this summer, and a possible small resurgence next winter, but I don't see this thing as going very long. I think it'll probably end up being a little worse than bird flu from 2009, which is really bad, really terrible. It's horrible that people are suffering and, of course, dying. That is terrible. But I don't think that it's going to be, a massive pandemic. A lot of the overreaction that we're doing right now absolutely collapse this thing when the weather comes up in the northern hemisphere. So I don't see this is a trigger. I don't see it actually continuing to inform policy very much directly.
All right, Jan, temporary measures that you think are going to become permanent. UBI, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what's interesting to me is, I've been watching all the seeds of everything that is happening now be planted over, as well, we all have, right? We've seen the MMT meme that came out, probably a few years ago, started becoming more and more prominent. Every week you see more MMT, you mentioned the media, you see more UBI being talked about. All these memes that started generating, over the last, say, 2 to 4 years are now coming to fruition. And like Gabriel said, this is a perfect, we have the opportunity to implement them now. And so I think those are the things. I mean, I think the financial changes are coming. I think helicopter money and digital dollars, like Neil said, are absolutely happening. They're literally happening right now. And everything's positioned for those to become permanent. So I do think we're moving to a digital society. I've been talking about this for a long time. I think money's becoming digital regardless. If we ever had this bubble corona without this, we would have been here. So I think we got a little bit of acceleration to the schedule for implementation of some of these policies. They would have been here anyway within the next decade. If they're going to happen within the next 2 years now instead, then that's what's happening. So I think, if anything, we just got a boost in terms of timelines. But I think if you were paying attention, all of these things were already falling into place over the last couple of years, and it was just a matter of what spark was going to cause it to happen. I think we could probably all agree that the COVID is not the cause of any of this. It's really just, it could have been anything. It could have been any small hiccup in the economic system that triggered this, collapse. And now that we have the collapse, we can come in and sort of implement all these rescue policies. And, things are going to get shaken up. I don't know what it's going to look like in the future. I do hope that the authoritarianism is temporary. And I wasn't suggesting that the virus is going to be here for a long time. I was suggesting that even if it's here for a short time, it could cause the authoritarian policies, which then become more long-term, because once the laws, or once they're even customary, like keeping distance from your neighbors is like, now it's a social thing, or wearing a mask. These things could change our culture without even being laws, and they could become permanent just from the practice, of those behaviors.
All right, Jan, I want to move on to productivity here. Yesterday's show, people were asking me about Swan. They're like, dude, Swan is already in effect. And I remembered, it was supposed to debut in late March. So tell us what's going on.
Yes, late March is in fact here. And so, on a positive note, we have been hustling. The nice thing about Swan, we're a fully remote company, so we were not impacted by Corona in terms of having to change anything about how we work. We already, video conference and Slack all day, so that was all good. We've been hustling to get the product out the door. Obviously, a lot of us, have kids at home or other distractions, so things have changed. But we are rolling out now. We're getting people in the door. For those of you who don't know, Swan is at swanbitcoin.com, and it's just a very simple way to save Bitcoin on a recurring basis. It withdraws from your bank account, drops it into a custodial. Obviously, it's custodial to purchase, and then eventually you can withdraw it after it passes all the fraud checks. You can get into an automated withdrawal, so it goes straight to your Bitcoin wallet. And we're currently rolling people in cohorts. If you want early access, please DM me on Twitter. It's SKWP. Pronounced Scoop. Just DM me. I'll give you some early access. But really, on Monday, we're going to start rolling in more and more people, and we'll be fully open probably by the end of that week, so that just anybody could sign up.
He is linked to below, of course, and Swan is linked to below. And they're people say I don't like buying from Coinbase. Well, here you got another option there now. So very good.
Yeah, we want to have something that's better for newbies. If you want to send somebody new to start using Bitcoin, start saving Bitcoin, we don't want them to be hit with like all these altcoins or have to learn about, you don't want to have to explain to your family why they shouldn't buy Litecoin. This is not a conversation that any Bitcoiner should waste time on. Send them to a Bitcoin only on-ramp and be done with that. All right, Neil, what's up? Any Blockstream news and what's going on?
Like with Blockstream, it's difficult to know where to start. Like with Swan, we're majority remote. So again, things haven't really impacted as much. Actually, there's been increased trading activity as a result of all of the volatility going on. So business-wise, like that's quite good for us with our products like Liquid and Blockstream Green. We just literally, while I've been speaking to you, went live with a new announcement that we added 10 new members to the Liquid Federation. Some good ones there are Ledger, who will be launching some Liquid-related applications within their hardware wallets. Also Wire, who I used to work for, and they've launched an app. I think a lot of your listeners are based in America. So if they're interested in testing the Liquid network, getting hold of some Liquid Bitcoin, if they go to liquid.net, Wire have a really cool widget that allows people to buy with a debit card or Apple Pay in just a couple of minutes. And then they can try sending around some Liquid Bitcoin, super low fees, transfers really fast. And also you get confidential transactions, which keeps all of your transactions super private. And then also we got HODL. I mean, there's 10 members, but another one of them is HODL. So if people are interested in, anybody outside of the US is interested in swapping in and out of Bitcoin and Liquid Bitcoin, they can do that through HODL. There's also BISC, which was set up by Wiz, who's also a new member on the Liquid network. Also, the Liquid network's capacity just exceeded the public channel capacity on Lightning. So we got like 952 Bitcoin pegged into the network now. That's to be expected. Like, I'm not saying that Liquid is competing with Lightning. They both fulfill completely different roles. Lightning's for smaller retail transactions, micro transactions. Liquid is more for traders, people that are doing high value, slower transactions. So that's good to see that developing and gaining momentum. Also, I think with the halvening coming up, we're probably going to see a lot more trading activity and people sending to and from exchanges, sending to and from friends, OTC, and that's going to start to clog up the network again. Like if we thought 2017 was bad, we've got way more exchanges, way more liquidity sources, and way more people on board this time. So the next rally, which I expect to be very soon, could see a lot of people finding it very difficult to make Bitcoin transactions. That's terrible for traders. So I'd recommend any traders out there to check out the Liquid network and start testing with it now before it gets too late. We've also got, like, in terms of our other products, there's loads of other stuff. We've got some new updates coming to Blockstream Green. We're going to have an update coming to Blockstream Satellite, which will expand coverage and do some other very cool things. We've got some Blockstream Satellite kits going to be launched within a couple of months, and that will allow people to buy a kit off the shelf and start using running a Bitcoin node completely privately without kind of alerting anybody on the internet that they're running one. Yeah, we've got a bunch more stuff coming down the pipeline. So anybody out there should be following Blockstream on Twitter and see all the cool technology that we're coming up with. Dude,
thank you for that insider information. You're only going to hear it here, people. Pound that like button. Gabriel, do you have anything you're doing, or you have any questions for Neil or Jan about what they just said?
No, that was really informative. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Now, I just want to thank, in the chat, somebody just sent me Bitcoin. That was very generous of you, dude. Thank you very, very much for supporting the show that way. That's awesome. All right. Now we're going to get to conclusionary remarks. We've hit the end of the show. It's been quite a few wild weeks here. We'll start with Jan. You're new to the show. Anything you want to add? Anything you want to share? You want to wrap up anything? Anything you meant to say that you got left out? Any words of encouragement?
Yeah, I want to apologize for you if I was doom and gloom, because I'm not really. I'm a very positive person in general. I'm just being a little bit realistic about what's around us and how to react to it. And I think it's important we stay sober and like rational, right? And not let the fear get to us. Keep working on our projects, make things good that are good for people, that are useful for Bitcoin, to make Bitcoin a healthier ecosystem. I'm glad to hear what Neil's working on. I'm a Blockstream customer myself with a green wallet, awesome wallet. These things need to be done, and it's great that we're here and we're working on this stuff, even in the midst of this world-changing crisis. And I think that we are somewhat lucky to be here at this time. We're at a moment where we can actually help the world with Bitcoin, where perhaps, a few years ago, people didn't really take Bitcoin seriously. I think they're going to take it a lot more seriously now with what's happening. And I think it's very opportunistic. I mean, I don't want to sound like we're taking advantage of people during a time of crisis, but we're not. Bitcoin is not something that is taking advantage of you. Bitcoin is a lifeboat in the middle of a world that's collapsing because of a bad structure. It's structured badly. It's systemically poorly built, right? I'm an engineer, and I look at the banking system and everything else as an engineer. I am new to economics. I am new to finance. I understand these things only because I'm in Bitcoin. I've been listening to a lot of macro podcasts since I got into Bitcoin, and I've gotten a lot more quote unquote woke about how the world works because of Bitcoin. And now that I look at it with an engineer's lens, I see that the system is not well built. Bitcoin is well built, and it's early. It is very early. We have to always keep that in mind, how early we are and what we are expecting of people around us in terms of when we're pitching Bitcoin. They're not all going to jump on board tomorrow. That's definitely not going to happen. We have to be realistic with our timelines, but at the same time, we have to take advantage and teach people during this crisis why this crisis is happening, what's going to happen next potentially, and how Bitcoin fixes this.
Very, very solid there. Pound that like button. Neil, your thoughts, anything you want to share, conclusionary remarks?
I'm all good. Thanks a lot for having me on the show. It's been good.
Awesome. Okay. So those are tight remarks there. Nothing else to add? Nothing. How's Thailand? I mean, how's it out there?
It's nice. We're starting to have a little bit of a lockdown here. They're closing most of the establishments at 6 p.m. and all of the restaurants are only doing takeaway. but people can still step out of the house as long as they're not below 5 or over 70. So it's not too bad. It's all right.
All right, cool. Good update. All right, Gabriel, we're leaving. You're going to sum it all up. What was left out? You can bring up anything. Tell us what you're doing. Take it away, baby.
Yeah. So where I am is kind of similar to Neil's situation. It's like semi shutting down and kind of warnings, but not totally done. And that's like, man, that is such a good balance. I feel I was talking to my father in the Los Angeles area, and he's having trouble getting deliveries and things like that. And that's really tough. I hope that the supply chains can withstand this situation. I think that it'll be just fine because it's freaking people saying not to go out. It's not people dropping like flies, 1919 Spanish flu. It's just people's opinions and things that they're saying. So any supply chain stuff, I think we can very easily fix should they begin to crumble a bit in this situation, just by loosening standards and saying, okay, listen, you guys can make food now, you know? But where I am, that's not the case. We've got power. We've got internet. Hugely different situation than Spanish flu. I mean, if you're quarantined, you can still communicate. You can still really be in touch with the world like you couldn't before. You were really isolated in a quarantine before. Whereas now with the internet, boy, it's a really different situation. And as a homebody myself, having an extra excuse not to go out, I'm kind of living the dream right now, to be honest. So enjoy this time for what it is. It's a time to get in touch with yourself as well. Get back in touch with your creative projects. That's what I'm doing. I have an online business, and of course, we focus a lot on digital and internet. So while things did kind of experience a bit of a hiccup as the panic really reached its fever pitch, things are loosening up again now, and we're seeing really big traffic. So that is sort of a silver lining for people running digital businesses who planned ahead for this type of situation. One of the big reasons why I focused my business activity in that direction. So, in summation, use this time to be with your family, the people with whom you don't need to keep a 6-foot distance from. Use the time to cuddle with your pets and reconnect with your kids that can't go to school. Take charge of your family's happiness and spend time together and really get back in touch with yourself, because the time to come will be unlike the last decade. It's going to be a totally new situation. And it's not because of this virus. It's because everyone has had a time to reset. And we're going to have a massive amount of various resets in the world. So the time now is to set your life in order. And this is a great time to get into Bitcoin. People are going to accumulate familial dynasties during this quarter.
Dude, that is a great way to end the show, man. That is positive. In motion, we're entering a golden age. Start your family dynasty now. Don't look back in 10 years and say, oh, my God, that guy started a family dynasty. I could have done the same thing. Don't be a regret. No regrets, dudes. So live it up. All right, dudes. Thank you, panel. You were awesome. I'm Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Remember to subscribe to this channel, like this video, share this video, pound that like button, bang that bell button. You get a new show here every day. Friday is This Week in Bitcoin. I'll be back tomorrow night for the Beyond Bitcoin show. Shabbat Shalom. Everybody stay cool out there. Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin. 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin strong hand. See you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.